Bop-a-dee-boo, bop-a-doo, bop-a-dee, bop-bam, boo-da-boo, bam-bam. Yeah, that's right. This is Live Life Better, and I don't sing. It's not what I do for a profession. I'm an actor. That's...
And you act like a singer.
And I act like a singer. That's right, Tim. This is Live Life Better, and today on the podcast, we talk to Louann Brizendine. She is the author of The Female Brain. I read this book, had to have her on. Was totally enamored by the book and the insight, really while reading it, that I gained from it. It's really great to just learn about the opposite sex. I think we're so different. It's so important to try to bridge that gap. Do you think, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's a basis.
I mean, we forget that, I think, in our mundane lives, like how important it is to remember that we are different. We're not the same. We don't think the same necessarily. And the more we can understand each other, the more we can tolerate each other, the better we're going to be, the better our relationships are going to be. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this podcast. She was a delight to have on. We did it through Skype, so the audio is not as good as I want it to be. But that is life, as they say. Enjoy. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, ah, ah. Ooh, chakalaka. Welcome to Live Life Better. This is Scott Eastwood. I want you to live the best version of your life. We're all human beings. We're all just trying to figure it out. Find something you love and chase it. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed your book.
Well, thanks. You read The Female Brain and the Male Brain, or just the female?
I have not read The Male Brain. I just read The Female Brain, but I know that you wrote the Male Brain as well. I will enjoy checking that out. And I was
help to significant others sometimes. If you're a guy, you can give The Male Brain to your.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was a good idea to read The Female Brain, You
got brownie points for that.
Yeah, well, I have several sisters, and I grew up around women, and I've had several relationships, and I think we're all searching, right? We're all seeking to understand the opposite sex better, right? Or each other better.
Each other better. I think we're trying to just do whatever we can to learn as much as we can to make our relationships work, because when they don't work, that's the time we say, wow, scratch your head, what's this on? What's this about?
Yeah, and what's interesting is I took some psychology classes in college, and it seems that, we repeat our patterns. We find ourselves continually repeat our patterns unless we identify those patterns and know when we're doing them, we could consciously change them or not. So I've always been intrigued by trying to understand and trying to communicate better. In turn, trying to digest as much knowledge as I can about how we communicate with each other and why we do certain things. But I found your book fascinating from a scientific point of view about how how men and women really feel about things differently. And I guess my first question to you would be, when does this start? Because, we start as embryonic, right? And then we become fetuses at some point. Is this in that stage that this is where our brains are developing differently?
I think if you just wanted to cut to the bottom line about what's really different and how that happens, the minute that sperm enters egg, you're going to have carrying either a Y chromosome or an X, right? So if it's a Y, you end up male. End up with an X, it's female. So you're going to end up in about the male, the Y, within 8 weeks of conception. The tiny testicles in that male start pumping out huge amounts of testosterone that marinates the brain and body and changes the brain and body into male. So by the time we're all born, the female, of course, develops unperturbed by testosterone. And we're born male.
Which is what's the difference?
Well, the testosterone changes all of the genitals and all the rest of the body into male parts, whereas if you don't have any testosterone, it develops along what they call kind of the default pathway to female.
But women do carry some testosterone too, correct?
We do. We make some from our ovaries and some from our adrenals, but we don't have testicles, so we don't make the amount that you guys make, and you guys all of your life make about 10 times more than the average female.
And how much estrogen as men are we carrying?
Males actually do make a bit of estrogen because there's this very cool enzyme called aromatase, and it's not a coffee bean, it's an enzyme that converts the testosterone into estrogen in the male body and the brain. So your brain is running around with quite a lot of estrogen in it, believe it or not.
Really? Now, I always hear from my father used to always tell me, he'd always say, well, be careful how much edamame you eat. We go to sushi. He'd say, there's a lot of estrogen, and you get more estrogen than that. And I always thought, yeah, right. I'd probably have to eat a lot of soybeans for that estrogen level to change. But is that something I need to be fearful of, or?
Absolutely not. You are correct. Your body you're making so much testosterone that the little pishy, little tiny pea amount in a basket full of edamame is not going to make any difference at all.
Interesting. I'll have a tough time explaining that to my 88-year-old father. Tough time arguing that one.
That's soy products. The soy products have, what's called phytoestrogens. And they can be healthy for you, but they're not, believe me, they're not going to do anything to your testosterone.
Okay.
What's kind of the overview just between male and female brains? I mean, we touched briefly on it at the very beginning. I think it was eight weeks testosterone is released, and that's when the brains actually physically start to change.
So that testosterone that starts to build up and up and up as the testicles grow, the body grows in the fetus, because the 8-week-old fetus is like tiny, maybe the size of it's very, very small, like a kumquat or something.
Yeah.
But the testicles already are getting their job done making testosterone, which is very important to change the male parts and the brain circuits and the testicles and the penis start to develop, and it keeps the uterus from developing in the male. But at conception, we could go either way depending on the hormone. So the hormone testosterone is the major sculptor of your sex.
And what does it physically change in the brain? What are the physical differences?
So there's some examples. For example, there's an area called the area for sexual pursuit is the name of an area of the brain, and it grows to be about, in human males, about 2 times larger than in the female. So it causes growth in certain areas of the brain, like that area. In rats, it actually grows to be 7 times larger in the male than the female.
Wow. 7 times. So, I mean, that 2 times larger, and that propels males to chase, right? To want to procreate, right?
That is your biological purpose on the planet for males, is to have testosterone to run that part of the brain to pursue fertile females.
So we're not just scumbags.
You're not just scumbags.
We're not.
You're very wired to do that. And I think, like you were talking about, Scott, in the very beginning, it's really important to know these kinds of things about yourself and how you're wired and how your hormones are driving those circuits, because that, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to be a jerk about it. I mean, it's self-knowledge to know that that's the way that you're wired, and the fuel that's running those circuits is testosterone, and that you're searching out fertile females for the purpose you were put here for. So, that said, it doesn't mean you're going to have to always be searching out fertile females. I mean, you can make a choice. We have free will as humans. So, to understand your biology means that that your biology is not going to be destiny.
No, but it's like a war waging inside of us, right? And I feel like usually the biological war is stronger. And it's just going to like tip that war.
So males at the age of 19 to about 25 have their highest testosterone level they'll have in their life. So that then starts to back off 1 to 2% per year after that, up until you're in your 80s. I mean, you still have enough to procreate in your 80s. But you're not going to have that huge level that you have when you're younger that's really pushing your circuits in that direction.
This might be more of a philosophical question, but why do you think that men would develop naturally to be more interested in sex or to think about sex more often than a female? Is it that the man is more charged with the pursuant and the woman is busy building a tribe or a community or support for raising a child?
Well, I think you guys are onto something, because if the female, once she becomes pregnant, has a 9-month commitment to, growing that fetus inside her, and then human babies are born at such a helpless stage that it's then a couple of years before the baby could even exist on its own. So for females, that commitment to nesting and taking care of the offspring is different than you guys. All you do is deliver the sperm. I mean, in a biological sense. Humans really need 2 parents to try and, secure the nest and provide, for things for the baby. But in terms of just the biology between the male and female, the female is going to have all of those months and years of commitment to one sexual encounter. So, she's not going to be necessarily pursuing to get pregnant. You guys are the ones that are built for that. That's your job.
So I read in your book that I can't remember which chapter it was, but it talks about the differences in pleasure in the way that it affects male brain versus female brain. So if we're talking about, on an evolutionary level that we're wired differently, how does pleasure play into this though, right? Like, because if we're saying we're just wired that way, and that's what we're supposed to be, but I think there's also like a pleasure element in it as well, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Sex is great. We like sex, but it affects us differently.
It's so important for the survival of the species to have both males and females enjoy sex, because you wouldn't do something that wasn't pleasurable. So your brain drives you towards doing things and repeatedly doing things that give you pleasure. So that's why it's wired that way. It's wired that way to keep you doing it.
But what are the major differences with? And I remember reading this specifically in the book. There was different areas of the brain that pleasure affected males and women.
You mean in terms of the sexual part of that?
In terms of when a woman receives pleasure, a man receives pleasure, it affects their different portions of the brain. Am I correct when I say that?
So you must have been reading the Forbidden Chapter 4.
Ah, yes.
That's the one I never get interviewed on. It's like not allowed except on Scott's podcast.
You can say whatever you want.
So basically, they've done a lot of research and watched the brains of females and males as they have an orgasm and looking at different areas of the brain that light up. And particularly in females, the area that's called the amygdala, and you may recognize that area of the brain because that's the area for fear and anxiety. And it gets turned off. I mean, it gets put on hold, the area for fear and anxiety, when you start having sex. So it's part of the process, especially for females, as you sort of start. And that's probably one of the reasons foreplay for females is so important, is that area of the brain has to get turned off first, so that it's kind of put on the sidebar. So, your alert for your anxiety and your fear are put to the side while you're having sex.
Okay.
I've heard a lot recently from girlfriends over the years that it's different for girls. When we have sex, we fall in love. To try to put it simply, Yeah,
you're generalizing, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not all women, right? I mean,
I think that the issue of sort of physical sexual commitment for females tends, this is a generalization. I mean, it's not for all females, because I know there's a lot of differences, these days, especially.
I've been one night standed.
Yeah.
And
they left me in the dust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's some phrases that my son uses too. He says, "Mom, she's just one of ththose who just, it was a one night stand with her." He
took advantage. She took advantage of me.
she wants dick. I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah, Mom. There's a lot of those girls out there these days." Well, that's sort of flipping the old thing on around these days. But I think what you're talking about in this issue of the emotional, physical commitment that females may feel to a male that she's having as a sexual partner may have some biological underpinnings to it that makes sense, because if she's going to become impregnated by that man, she needs to be bonded to him and have him bond to her in order to raise offspring. So you just think about it, we don't deal with that biological aspect that much anymore, because we have birth control, we have all kinds of other options now that we didn't have. But just that doesn't mean our biology has changed, and our emotions are still hardwired for hundreds of thousands of years.
What do you think the effects of birth control are having on women, like long term?
You can take birth control around, just 12 months out of the year, year in and year out, and it doesn't seem to hurt your fertility any. You can just stop it, and then within about 3 or 4 months, you can get pregnant. So it doesn't seem to have much effect in terms of a female's fertility, ultimately. But I think are you talking about psychologically or
So, well, I was referring to both, but I've obviously seen psychological effects or mood swings, but if you're saying it doesn't really affect fertility, do you know that for sure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's been many studies on that, and it's for females and male. There's people can end up taking birth control for years and then finding out all along they really didn't need it because they have infertility.
Or had a really good pull-out game.
That's right. They make mistakes in that area, which is rare. And I think males also sometimes don't know that they're infertile either. There's all kinds of things if you have fertility problems with. I mean, the technology is amazing these days, so they can basically. It's pretty rare that you find a couple that they can't end up having you get pregnant at some point. But the birth control pills or the constant birth control females are on don't seem to do anything to their fertility. But of course, the new male pill is coming down the pipe within the next couple of years.
How does that work? Do you know anything about that new male pill?
I don't know exactly the mechanism that it's going to work, but when it comes out, we'll probably sure all know. I mean, it doesn't necessarily kill off your sperm, but it's going to do something to basically make them
drunk, make them sleepy, sleepy sperm.
So it's easier. I mean, you guys have there's only one egg you have to deal with, but where there's millions of sperm you have to deal with.
Sure.
So it's taken them a long time to figure that one out.
Yeah, I know. Way too long, right? I mean, it seems like we just kind of stuck it to women. Like, oh, well, you got to be on birth control, right? It's like that or
the responsibility went there.
Yeah.
They often are the ones that deal with the initial immediate problem as well.
Sure, yeah, right? So. Baby in body.
So obviously we go to sex first because our brains are built that way as two boys over here.
Yep.
What are some of the main differences just from 30,000 feet, between male and female brains, or what they're geared towards in terms of strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think one of the things that's so women if they're on their natural menstrual period cycle, with it's a 4-week affair, and the estrogen is going up high in the first couple of weeks, and then it dips down as the ovulation happens, and progesterone comes on board as soon as ovulation happens. So that this kind of like waves of hormones through the month changes some of the female's circuitry a bit in terms of her her sexual interest. Her testosterone level has that same kind of wave too. So a few days before ovulation, females tend to get their horniest 80 times during the month. So, and they've done lots of studies where females will even start to dress a little more sexy, or they'll start wearing a little bit more makeup, or their hair is a little different. They'll just start to do things that are they consider attractive to males those few days before ovulation. So actual behavioral things in females that are very subtle and sometimes not very conscious to them start to happen during different times of the cycle. And you guys may be familiar, I don't know if you've ever had girlfriends who are just on their natural cycle, but the few days before your period starts can be a very crabby, irritable time, the proverbial PMS time, right? What happens is that your progesterone is taking a deep, fast dive, and that increases irritability. Some women will burst into tears and cry very easily. In my clinic, we would call it the crying over dog food commercials sign. So at the drop of a
dog food, Oprah. Gotcha. Copy.
So you guys have had that experience on the other end, like.
Yeah, I mean me crying. Dog food, yeah. After a long weekend, need to be helded. Bad breakup, but it's neither here nor there. Is there any? This is going to sound crazy, but I've noticed, and I don't know if it's just coincidence, but it seems as if, is there any correlation? Has anyone ever done any studies about lunar cycles, like the moon versus when people are horny, or people are, because I feel like full moon, you go out in full moon, like people are out and people are horny,
That what you just said was, so yes, they have done on that, and the cycles, or female cycles, don't tend to follow the moon very much, so they decide that's probably kind of old hat in terms of the biology of it. But you just said what's operative is people like to go out in the full moon at night and watch it, and they're out there. It's like something that pulls you outdoors because it's light outdoors and it's beautiful, and
we're werewolves.
And romance. Yeah.
Just savages.
Yeah.
All of us animals.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense.
Animal instinct.
Yeah. God.
So I keep pushing a little bit, but are there, what I'm getting at is, are there differences, like, are women better multitaskers? Are men better at compassion? Is there?
Well, probably not. But.
Well, or maybe I'm 75% female. I don't know.
It's interesting when you talk to people who have lived as both a male and then transitioned to female, trans people, and then or the other way around. It's really interesting to listen to their experiences, having been both or lived as both and had the hormones of both at different times. And I think that's what you're getting at, is how different is it? And so it may be hard for you guys to kind of imagine that, the issue of empathy and compassion that you're talking about, that's not gender specific at all. But often for males, they have your testosterone drives you guys in a very kind of like, you're like straight ahead, forward, very direct, you just want to get the job done. And females may want to like take the temperature of the emotional picture a little bit more. They may want to feel like well, how are you feeling, right? Or what's going on emotionally for you? Females want to have that information from you guys a lot more than you're probably used to considering it yourself.
Certainly my mom always wants to know all the details.
All the details.
So the mom thing for guys, I think, is very, that's complicated. Because you want to tell her enough to satisfy her, but you don't want to, you don't want to share, you don't want to overshare.
I was reading your book about, was it body symmetry?
Yeah.
Body symmetry, and it was fascinating because you were talking about how women were more apt to be attracted to the opposite sex who had better body symmetry, right? And is that
I found to go both directions, by the way.
I find that to be very true.
Totally.
Yeah, because so you can say that you know that from your own personal experience, but you're responding to something that's actually very biological, and that is that it's a sign of health and fertility to have symmetry, because it says something about that person's genes.
Very interesting. Isn't that, to think about, if somebody was, what if they were abnormally tall or, but they had like perfect body symmetry?
Well, that's kind of you're mixing your metaphors a little. If you look at it's usually got to do often with facial symmetry. That is what humans are the most interested in, is faces. They're most interested in what somebody's face looks like and how your eyes kind of move together, or how your face moves together, or how it may be kind of quirky. Quirky can be a little cute, but the attraction to facial symmetry is what most of the studies are looking at.
That's so shallow of us, right? When you think about it, right? Like we're taught for so many years to not base, like in school and by our parents and anyone we interact with in our adolescence, we're taught, if you've had a decent upbringing, it's like, don't be shallow. Don't judge people the way they look. Don't point. Don't, but from a biological we are gravitated to somebody who has better body symmetry.
We are
biologically shallow.
And I think males, when they hear that they're biologically driven to search out fertile females, actually, when you hear that, don't you find it's a little bit relieving?
Oh, definitely. Well, you're substantiating years of what we know. I think as males is we're hardwired differently. The problem still stands is how do you explain that to the opposite sex, right? How do you explain that? Hey, look, we are just hardwired differently.
Well, yeah. I think women. Sorry.
Go ahead. You said women what? They appreciate that.
They appreciate honesty, I find, but it's still hard, right? It's still hard as soon as you have emotions for somebody, as soon as you you become closer to another human being, you have history. I think it's still complicated. It still gets very sticky and messy, and if you have that desire, right, and that's fueling something you really can't, you have control over because like you said, you have free will, but you're batting it off with a stick, just down boy.
And I think that you are absolutely correct. It's very hard for women to understand that because they haven't lived that. And just as you haven't lived the other side, that's I think what you meant by reading the female brain, probably educated you about a lot of things that that you hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, it's interesting. The symmetry part, I often find babies will just stare at me. And
Why, you think you have perfect symmetry?
Well,
Is that
I
what you're trying to say?
Maybe one day I did, not anymore.
You hear this guy? Not only is he shallow, but he's a narcissist.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you guys are both very cute.
No, but my point is, like, it's so hardwired that it's just it's there from the beginning. You know, you are whatever, if it's long hair or whatever it is that is the thing that draws that attention.
But what is it exactly? Is it, okay, so you say symmetry, but like everybody has their own taste, right? Everybody has their own, what they're attracted to.
That's absolutely true. So that's the issue of, when you talk about scientific studies that have been done, they choose things, scientists choose things that they actually can study, that they're able to study. And this area of preference and what may be, the two of you guys may have a very different type of preference in females. And, they may be two women who are equally symmetrical, let's say. But one may appeal to one of you but not the other. The same thing is true for females. Females have a very big preference for what they like in males often. All the studies tend to say they like a male who's at least 4 inches taller than they are, and on and on. They've done a lot of studies on those kinds of preferences. And some of them you can chalk up to biology, and some of them probably not. I mean, there's this thing about, girls and guys sort of, they're used to things about their sisters and their mothers, and that maybe, have primed them in some way. It's the same thing with girls and their dads.
But why then are there, I mean, I already kind of know the answer, at least I think I do, but if we are preordained to be attracted to symmetry, or whatever we consider symmetrical, why do people, men and women, I'm going to say mostly women, I'm going to generalize a little bit here, mostly women, why are there some women who are only attracted to arbitrary things like money and security more than...
Okay, now you get into a really important area because, females want financially secure mates for an obvious, important reason. And that is that they need supplies to build the nest and raise the offspring. That doesn't just come for free. She needs someone, even if she's making some of her own money, she needs someone to contribute and help with that. So, females very typically take into account a guy's prospects, even, even when he's very young and his own potential hasn't. She wants a guy with potential if she's younger, and then as a lot of younger women will go out with guys who've already kind of made it in the world, right? That's their attraction. So they're going to vote. That's going to trump symmetry, trump the other things. So,
but not for all women, right? I mean, not for all women.
No.
I mean, some women don't place importance on that, right? Because they're probably if they're self-made or they're doing their own thing, and they place maybe there's some at a certain level, but I feel like there's difference in women, right? There's difference in men too. I mean, there's men think like this as well, but some want or place higher importance on those things. And why is that? Is that a product of your environment more so than a biological factor?
Well, I think it's changed a great deal in the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
Because women now have access to, when I went to medical school, it was just very early in the days when women were going to medical school. I mean, there were 28% of my class was female, and it wasn't for a few years later until it was 50-50. But, there were, if you go back in the early 1960s, there were only, my husband's medical school class, there were only 4 or 5 women in his class. So what my point being is that like women now have professions, they have ability to make their own money, and so, like you say, it's not that important to some women as it may have been in a different generation, because it's the bottom line is you need to supply the needs of being able to take care of kids, and that costs money.
You know, what's interesting is this is a very relevant topic right now, because we hear a lot about women's pay and inequality and this debate going on. So I wonder how, if everyone is paid equally, right? And
Yep.
we figure that out. How does that affect courtship between a man and a woman, right? Because traditionally, at least the way I was raised, to be a gentleman, right? To open the door for a woman, to pick up the tab, to take them out, to be the person that that goes out into the world and asks them on a date, right? So I wonder, does that change courtship?
I think it will change courtship to some degree in some of the aspects you were talking about. For example, if everybody's going to be making the same amount of money, et cetera, then you're going to go Dutch more often, right? That's just that'll naturally become the way it is. So, say your kids' generation, that's just, and let's say we get more to equal pay for equal work for women at some point in this country. We're one of the ones that lags behind in the Western world on that issue. So hopefully we'll get there in this generation. Hopefully your daughters and sons will be able to grow up in that world. And so, you'll still be teaching your sons to be, polite and gentlemanly, right?
Sure.
But the issue of the money thing about always picking up the tab and that kind of thing may sort of decline.
But what about men being pursuant of women, right? I mean, because that's sort of traditionally.
That's not going to change.
You don't think that'll change?
No. The biology is not. Even if we have equal pay for equal work, the biology is not going to change. Our hormones are not going to change.
When men stay home and are the caretakers, and when there's kind of a traditional role reversal, it seems that it works very well, at least in the experiences that I'm aware of, and
I've seen it work well and not well.
Yeah. Well,
I've seen there be a hang up, right? With a male being, if the woman makes more money than him, there be some sort of social issue where he feels not capable enough, or
so it's challenging his ego.
Maybe challenging his ego.
The question that I was. Go ahead. Sorry, Leon.
I think one of the first things that you find when you have a baby with somebody is like the baby prefers the adult with the breasts.
Yeah.
I always prefer the adult with the breasts.
Yeah. It doesn't change for us.
It doesn't change. Oh, it's the same. Okay, it's the same.
That's right. I remember one of my girlfriends, we were at the same stage with children, and she was one of my head nurses, and we had both of our children were breastfeeding at the time. They're both boys, and she says, I said, I wonder when these guys are going to give this up. And she looked at me, she says, not till they're walking down the aisle with the next pair.
Amazing.
So at any rate, but that issue of kind of like the father staying home. So there is a hormonal change that goes on when you become a father. Your testosterone goes down about 30%.
30%? When you become a father?
Yeah, so that lasts for about 6 months. It's not forever, it lasts for about 6 months. And then you have another hormone called prolactin, which means prolactation. Females have a lot of it to make breast milk, but males, we don't. The prolactin hormone in the males goes way up by about 30% when you become a father. And we don't really know what that's doing, so we just have kind of nicknamed it the parenting, the fathering hormone. So you guys get a whole different hormone burst when you become a father. So I take that back. Your hormones do change a bit. It tends to be for the first, like about 6 months after the baby's born, and then you kind of go back to normal.
Is that our biological clock saying, hey, you need to be there for the female while she's...
That's the biological
hypothesis of it.
Right.
Right.
Yes, that's why that might be. Is you don't want to be out chasing other skirts. You're supposed to be home taking care of your offspring.
Right.
But why are we more, as men, well, I'm not saying more, but this is a generalization. Why are we intrigued by another fertile female instead of, say, the fertile female that you just had a child with?
Why is monogamy so hard?
Yeah. Like if we're preordained to want to continue to procreate, right? That's going to survive our species. Why wouldn't it be with
that
one?
Programming doesn't change when you have your own children. That programming is still there, and so there's only about 5% of mammals that pair bond and are monogamous, and the human is not one of them.
5%. What are the 5%?
Well, you may have heard about that little creature called the prairie vole. Have you ever heard of Mr. Prairie Vole? He is a species that pair bonds female for life, and they raise their pups together. And they have different genes than the cousin called the montane vole. The cousin to that prairie vole is like kind of a hit and run guy. I mean, he inseminates and then is gone. So interesting, in the same kind of animal, the voles, there are two different types, and they've drilled down on the genes. The genetics are different. The prairie voles have a special kind of gene that makes them monogamous. So we call it the hormone of monogamy. And the genes of monogamy, which is kind of related to oxytocin. You've heard that. The oxytocin is the love hormone. At any rate, so human males are not, they're not wired to be monogamous. And of course, so it's a behavioral commitment. You commit yourself to being monogamous to the person you're raising your children with. But I think that causes human beings a lot of difficulty in their lives to have that be a biological, like you say, you still have that same drive to search out fertile females and go find fertile females even after you've had your own family. So I think that's a conflict that goes on.
Yeah, it's a battle.
You brought up. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You guys have probably watched that happen with friends of yours.
Sure.
Oh yeah. I'm not married, nor is Tim, but seen the battle. Seen the battle. That the war still continues.
You brought up transgender before. When a transgender person decides to take on different hormones, does their brain then actually grow differently at a developed age? Or is this something that potentially a female brain was born into a man's body? I mean, we're touching on all kinds of issues here, but
isn't it? It's really interesting, isn't it? So there's in the Netherlands, there's a hospital, there's a whole clinic that's been doing this for maybe now 40 years. They followed the whole trans community that want to change over, and so they have a protocol, and for 2 years you have to take the hormones of the sex that you want to become, and basically either have hormone blockers. Like for males, you have to take a hormone that blocks testosterone, and you start taking estrogen. And if you're going to be a female to male, you start taking testosterone. So they've done lots of very interesting psychological studies and cognitive studies, and they found, interestingly and not surprisingly, that the people going from female to male that are taking all the testosterone, their libido goes sky high. And the male to female, where they're taking testosterone blockers, their libido goes way down.
Wow.
And can a female that's turning male become less hardwired for monogamy. Just in specific instances like that. I guess we don't know, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly tracked. That these kinds of things are being tracked in individuals, and that question that you asked today become: will they maintain their kind of more greater tendency to monogamy that they had when they were female, and not once they become male? No, because their libido is so high. That's a great question. I think that's a very interesting question to ask some of the researchers.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very personal.
Yeah. One of my colleagues went through going male to female over the last 4 years, and I knew her when she was male and was a complete horror dog.
Really?
And now that she's female, not so much.
Wow.
That's interesting. A lot of. I mean, only in the last how many years have we've been injecting people with the opposite hormones, right? I mean, this is such uncharted territory.
You're absolutely right. Except there's one area which is that they've researched, which when men get prostate cancer, they give them a blocker for testosterone called Lupron. And their Lupron goes, so the testosterone goes a nosedive, way low. And so men will describe how much they basically don't have as much libido, and they will often become just much more interested in finding out how other people are feeling or what's going on in their lives. It's interesting. I've had one of the guy who's written a lot about this, so I can tell you about him, Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel Computers. When he went through his treatment for prostate cancer, his secretary said, "Oh my God, when Andy went on the Lupron, he would ask me about my kids and how I was doing and everything." He was always a gentleman, but it was never like he was sort of as kind of emotionally interested in what was going on in my life. He changed, his personality changed a lot.
And that's to stop the prostate from growing, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen guys like that, and I've heard that before. Now I'll wonder,
Would you just take the cancer?
Did you? No, I mean it's like almost men becoming in more touch with their female side, right? A little bit. So
exactly. I do think that you guys are at a disadvantage in this one area. You call it it's that your testosterone is driving you to focus on other things and getting in touch with your quote unquote feminine side. You may have little glimpses of it when you're a younger male at times, but older men say they really, really enjoy what happens to them as they get older and they're able to get more in touch with that side. They find that very pleasing, and so do their partners.
Sure, better communicator. Oh man, it's so weird. Why is it? It's just a cruel joke in your 20s and 30s, right? I mean, why? I'm like, why?
And 40s too.
And 40s, 50s. It's weird. It's very weird.
You feel it's weird because you think of yourself as having free will, and for all of us to feel like some of our self is driven by hormones and biology. It's not like all of us is, but it feels weird to feel like a whole chunk of us is driven by biology. And females are driven to get married and have babies and, procreate too. So that's something that females are driven towards too. And you guys, I'm sure, feel that all the time. It's kind of a conflict in females too.
Well, because, right, I think what that represents sometimes for men is when a woman wants to procreate with you, and you're still not in that place yet, that represents your freedom going away, right? This freedom.
Yes.
I don't know if freedom is tied to the feeling of the pursuant, right?
Absolutely, it's in direct conflict, like you said.
But what happens with women after they already have their kids, right? They already have a family. What happens with women when they fall for another man in a relationship, or do they, after they have kids, do they become less? That box has already been checked, right?
That's bingo. You got it. That box has been checked.
So then, do they become more, like, less likely to stay faithful, to be, do they have that wandering eye more?
I think it really, really depends. It depends on the primary relationship. Depends on
A lot of factors.
A lot of factors. These people are so individual, and how they change at different stages of their life. That's part of who we are and what our personalities are. So it really, really depends. But you make a good point for females. It's like once they've had your kids, then they're very busy raising their kids. And some women may get a wandering eye if that's their inclination.
You have kids.
I do.
After you had kids, do you ever feel the desire to have more, or is that box is checked for you now?
Yeah, I feel like that was a stage of my life that was great, and I enjoyed that. But it's like you don't feel like the urge to have more. You basically feel the urge to raise the ones you have, and then have a little freedom.
And then have your freedom back.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
But what that means to different people, to not be so tied to raising kids is a great stage in a woman's life. So actually, this thing about going through post-menopause, going through that stage is actually wonderful in a way for a woman. If she's already checked all those boxes, and now she's got some freedom.
Interesting. My younger sister is pregnant. She's only 24 years old. She's about to have a child. I'm about to be an uncle for the second time. So interesting times.
Congrats, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
And she's happy with her pregnancy.
Yeah, she's doing great. She's very young, and it's young. I think in the way I look at the world today, right? It's not young, maybe in if you look at the world, right? If you look at how not even traditionally, just like as today, like who gets like how old people are when they get pregnant today in the whole world, right? I would say they're much younger. Outside of maybe the continental United States.
Yeah, do you live in Los Angeles or Des Moines, Iowa, or
yeah, it just depends on where you live.
Rice
right?
paddies, or I think
Absolutely.
It's all different. It's really tough today because I'm 42, live in Los Angeles, where there are a lot of women who are late 30s, early 40s, who are single and have made that decision to not go down that road yet. So it leads me to question, like, what is there's certainly all these biological indicators, but there's, it's kind of back to nature versus nurture. There's a lot of environment involved in decision making. And then to Scott's point earlier, it's like, how do we as men, being trained, if you will, to be chivalrous or whatever the case is. And then now sometimes that's almost a negative to some girls that are like, I can do that myself, so the roles used to be a lot more clearly defined, and now it's like every single date is like, well, let's see what happens this time.
Exactly. Well, I think a lot of younger women are freezing their eggs.
Absolutely.
So they're having options to have children into their 40s and 50s. One of my girlfriends had twins at 51.
51. Wow. Is that dangerous on the body though?
Well,
even though you like actually given birth at 51, is that a lot harder or no?
I think it's a lot harder. Yes.
Because you're freezing your eggs,
right.
You're Xing out, right, like genetic birth defects, right, that happen after a certain age, right? And isn't there a ton of studies now that men might be equally responsible for contributing 50% of those birth defects, like Fragile X syndrome or?
and schizophrenia and stuff like that. If you're a male over 40, your sperm is, it's not, because, you get lots of mutations in all your cells, including your sperm and eggs, the longer we're on the planet. So there's more mutations that are, some of them are important, but some of them might be harmful. So that's why it's probably better off to have your kids when you're younger if you can.
So as our brain, from the standpoint of the brain itself, as in your book, you kind of go through the process of aging as well. And if you have a baby at 50, do you have a different brain than if you have a baby at 20? Or is it the release of the hormones in the process of giving birth that then produces the nurturing, or
the mommy brain, right?
Yeah, the mommy brain.
Mommy brain. Well, it'll happen no matter what age you are, probably, because all of the hormones for your breast milk and for all the hormones after giving birth will all be they'll all be similar when you're 50 as when you're 20. So that'll happen no matter what age you are.
But if you're having a kid at 50, are you as able to produce as much milk? Are you, physically?
Yeah, physically it's a lot harder. And of course, if you have twins, you see, people who have twins tend to not breastfeed. It's too hard.
So what do they say the age? Is it anything before 40? Is that when it?
So for reasons that we don't understand, it's just very much like clockwork. Between the ages of 36 and 37, if you look at fertility in women, at 36, 37, it starts to drop off sort of quickly after that.
Interesting.
That's why we freezing eggs in their early 30s if they haven't found the one yet. If they haven't found their sperm donor yet, they're deciding to.
Their specimen donor.
Yeah.
They can freeze their eggs and have that option. I don't know what percentage of them are actually using those eggs, because lots of those women end up finding partners and they don't need to use the eggs, but it's kind of like banking. It's expensive. Some companies are paying for it. I think Facebook pays for it, Twitter pays for it. If you work for them, they pay for getting your eggs frozen.
It's because they want you to work longer, right? They want to suck you in.
That's right. Don't give up on your job yet.
Yeah. They're like, oh no, we're doing this. It's super helpful. Actually, we just want you to be our slaves. It's terrible. Yeah.
So I think a lot of men these days are not wanting to, like you say, give up their freedom at a young age.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, giving up the freedom. I think that's probably what's caused me to, continue to repeat the same cycles over and over again. It's just that freedom.
So it has to be something that's worth. It has to be a relationship that you feel strongly enough that you're going to give that up, because a lot of guys, when you find somebody who's just so special and is somebody who just kind of completes you and you just feel like you can't live without them, then it's not going to be hard for you, Scott, to give that up. When that happens, it's not going to be so hard to give that up.
But then if you're too eager and too available, they're not interested anymore, right?
I think guys get to a certain stage. You guys get to a certain stage too, where you're kind of thinking, I'm kind of getting ready to get on with it.
What do you mean, move on? Relationship?
Get on with like settling down.
Oh, get on with settling down. Yeah. No, guys do start to feel that too. We
you go to weddings, or you go to weddings with all your friends.
Yeah.
Your baby sister's having kids.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trade-off. I was hanging out with a couple friends last night, and one of them had 4 kids with them. And I very much like to be, I value my alone time and quiet time and freedom and all that kind of stuff. But I was realizing, just in a different way, obviously I've seen it before, but I was realizing in a different way that they're experiencing a joy that I don't have. A togetherness that isn't a part of my experience.
Absolutely.
So
it is really a thrill. It's a thrill. It's a thrill to have kids with somebody. And that's a real type of thrill that people who haven't had kids yet don't know. But it's a whole it's a whole different level. I mean, and I think it takes guys by surprise, particularly.
Well, and my very honest friends also acknowledge the misery that comes.
Well, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You think like, oh my God, my friends who don't have kids, they don't have any idea how hard it is. They also don't know how absolutely life-changing it is, but they also don't know how hard it is.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about a lot. Well, thank you very much for talking to us, and thank you so much for writing the book. I can't wait to read The Male Brain now that I've read The Female Brain, and I recommend this book. Anyone who's listening, a great book to just sort of understand the opposite sex if you're a male, and if you're a female, maybe understand yourself a little better.
Right, yeah. So page 33 in The Male Brain, that's for you, Scott. That's your next.
That's for me, huh?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
We'll get that.
I'm in trouble.
We'll get that right now. We'll download the book.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Awesome talking to you today.
Hey guys, both of you, good luck to you. I hope you find the right one.
We're looking.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.